the time to watch our channel, Empower Africa Now. Today we have a very important topic. It's about money, remittances. As you know, we all need money. We use it as a facilitator to do our purchases, to pay for stuff. So it's very important at this time where the world is going through a difficult financial, economic situation to discuss money. So when I talk about remittances, I'm sure you are familiar with the different remittances that we see in the media. In fact, I'm familiar with that often remitted by one of the greatest boxers, Floyd Mayweather, when he does things like, "This is Floyd Mayweather." So I am not referring to that kind of remittance because he remits to himself. We also know that there are other forms of remittances whereby maybe in appreciation of an activity that is common in the African communities, like dancing, traditional dance. We usually remit money, to dance groups. We remit money, and this is common in the Igbo tradition in Nigeria. And I think actually Floyd got it from the Igbos. So this is not the type of remittance that I'm referring to. I'm referring to remittances as the money transferred back home by migrant workers overseas. So this is what I'm referring to. In 2018, actually, the International Monetary Fund estimated that about $529 billion was transferred to middle-income countries by citizens of those countries that are working overseas. So that represented an increase of about 9.6% from 2007. So in a situation where we have not just a virus, a pandemic that is hitting the world hard, different economies, remittances have been hit hard actually. And the World International Monetary Fund has sounded that warning based on figures that they are realizing. So I wanted us to analyze this issue of remittances and see how it impacts our different communities in the long term, and what are some of the strategies that can be put in place to make sure that the declines in remittances do not hit hard our population. So once more, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, again I remind you to subscribe and share the information that you receive. We at Empower Africa Now, it's our duty. We'll take on all subjects that can empower our people in one way or the other. We'll continuously break down information, be it in the health sector, in the economic business sector. As long as that can impact us in one way or the other, we'll present it to you. Again, what are remittances here? People go abroad for different reasons. The way the International Monetary Fund categorizes this is they look at it as migrant workers sending money back home. But we know that money is sent from either migrant workers who are working temporarily where they live and work. It's also sent by immigrants who have moved to different countries and have taken up settlement and permanent residency status. And some also do take up citizenship in the countries where they live. So all of this group is what we will refer to in this video as migrant workers. So it's again the money that it is sent home by workers overseas. So they send it to their family members to support their family members. So in order for us to really look at the impact of the current economic situation, there are 4 areas that we have to look at in order to understand this topic. Let's have the host country where migrant workers live and work. We have the workers themselves. And at the receiving end, we have the receiving countries, and then we have the recipients. So we will break this down in these 4 categories to see how the economic situation has impacted these remittances. You know, the effect of the coronavirus has been devastating on health. So how does migrant workers contribute to the economies of their host countries? So migrant workers are often filling different jobs where they live, be it in agriculture, construction, in service industry, in other professions, be it medicine, law, and so on and so forth, you name them. So they work and pay taxes. So as a result of that, they generate revenue for their host countries. They also spend in the economy. That's where they live. So a large chunk of their income is spent where they live, be it in the purchases, mortgages, cars, and they contribute to economic growth. And secondly, some startup businesses. In fact, all 3 categories of activity actually help in the GDP, overall GDP of the host countries. So when we look at the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has on the economies of the host countries, it's been really devastating globally. So what has happened is that in most countries, like in Canada, USA, in Europe, some policies have been made, enacted to sustain. For example, there are social support payments that have been made mandatory to support everyone in the population to weather this financial crisis that has been triggered by the coronavirus, so people can at least sustain and get back on their feet. So this has tremendous consequences on the finances of the people who are supposed to be sending money back home. And what are they? Number 1, there's been tremendous loss of employment. Businesses are shutting down, workers are being terminated, there is forced social distancing, actually having to stay at home. This is at the macro level. Okay, at the micro level, at the level of the individual, individuals have postponed the rate at which they will send money back home because that money is no longer available. They have had to postpone their own engagements, financial engagements, like car loans, purchases, okay, spending that they would normally do. And so even with the government policies that have come to alleviate some of this financial burden, like suspending interest rates on student loans, on credit card debt, and so on and so forth for a period of time, what has happened is that there is a gradual accrual of these payments that will need to be effected over time once normal activity resumes. So you see that this economic situation has not only led people to completely cut off sending money back home, but some have actually reduced the frequency of sending money. And so that is how remittances are being impacted in the short term. So let us now look at the receiving country, which is a third factor that I wanted to talk about. Receiving countries, how do they benefit from remittances? The number 1 benefit is through taxes. You know, money transfer has to do with charges and some taxes associated. So the receiving countries They generate revenue from the taxes associated with money transfer. Their businesses, such as banks and microfinance institutions, they also derive benefits from remittances through free deposits that are done in their financial institutions by those that are receiving money, such that the banks and microfinance institutions, they in turn charge transactional fees on that money. At times, these fees can even be very high that you wouldn't expect. You would wonder if you're receiving your own money that is just put there. They also charge interest on loans to other customers. So you see, all of this is generating business revenue opportunities for the banks and leading to economic boom. So when the money gets depleted, or when the amounts that are being sent out diminish, revenue that is being generated for the receiving country diminishes as well. Their businesses, like the banks that depend on this money in part, also suffer at a certain extent. So that is the level of the receiving country and associated businesses. The main focus, which is the fourth point, what I wanted to highlight, is really the receiver, the individual that is receiving. The recipient will be greatly impacted by the declines in money transfers overseas. We know that there are certain families that depend entirely on money being sent by their relatives, and the pandemic and economic decline associated with it is really going to impact a lot of things. We know, for example, there are 5 categories of areas where families or individuals choose to put their money. The money that is received from overseas support families in different ways. Generally, some of it is used for nourishment. Nourishment is one of the number 1 reasons. Health is another, and then education is the third. These are the 3 top categories of areas where money is being put into. Then the 4th category would be housing, maybe improvements in housing infrastructure, and the 5th would be small business startup. So the money that comes from overseas is often used for these 5 categories. So this is not an exhaustive list of what money is being used for, but oftentimes you know what it means to be at a receiving end, and the money start to dry out. So this is something that has happened several times. We remember the 2008, 2009 economic crisis. All these cycles, they dwindle the amount of money that is being sent out there. So the very first reflection that we have around this is around dependency. When you are at the receiving end, it's important to not be a receiver for too long, because imagine what happens when the hand that gives is cut off. So there's a ripple effect that translates right down to the receiver, direct and indirectly. What is happening is that migrant workers some have cut sending money home because they just don't have. Others have reduced the rate and the amounts of money that they will send home. So these 5 areas that receivers would use money for have been impacted. The impact of having less money coming from overseas, frequency for which it is sent, on the socio-economic status of the receivers is huge. We know that socio-economic status is one of the determinants of health, and when this is impacted, it means that there will be devastating consequences on the populations, especially those that depend on remittances from overseas. So what may happen Let us look at the areas where they spend the money. Nourishment. What happens is that those that depend on money from overseas to feed themselves will either skip meals or they will have reduced meals and reduced quality. That in turn has an effect on overall well-being. Let us look at health. They may not be able to afford medication that they need. They will not be able to seek care. So they tend to postpone health seeking. When you postpone health seeking because of a lack of means, it means that your health may deteriorate depending on the conditions that you have. You know, most of our healthcare systems pay for service kind of systems. Fee for service, we call them fee for service. Most of our healthcare systems are fee for service based systems. So you pay a fee upon consultation. So access to care is really not free in most of these places. Even when it is free, what about medication? So these are some of the impacts. Now, when we talk about education, who the families sent to school or at what level will be impacted. So those that depended on money to start new businesses to render themselves sustainable, they will no longer have this. So you see there is a ripple effect on the declines in remittances. Is it all negative? What can be done? There are all the 4 actors that are mentioned here. They have got a role to play. Number 1, the host countries, the efforts that they are making by providing some social support mechanisms to support everyone in the population that has gone through mandatory confinement and no work. Such measures need to be encouraged to render people be able to sustain this situation and gradually return to work. That is the first thing. Second thing is making sure that companies that are hiring people do not fire them or take advantage of this situation. This can be done through the labor laws of the different countries, because while there are labor laws in every country, the coronavirus pandemic has presented a completely different situation that needs to be treated on a case-by-case basis. So there's got to be policy directions around these areas and helping companies to keep their workers, if not employed, but at least on the company payroll when things resume and they resume their activities. So that was at the level of the host countries. Now the recipients themselves, it's also important. We have some things we can do at our own levels. It's very important to note that just being overseas, you already have a lot of engagements, financial engagements, just as everyone where you live, in terms of servicing your mortgages, car loans if you have them, or rents, or paying for education, and so on and so forth, insurance, you name them. So while you may have all these burdens, it's important to keep in mind the reasons for which you were sending money back home in the first place was to sustain your family. So you may consider not cutting off entirely, but making smaller and even frequent payments if you can, until you are able to get your feet back to normal. So that family cohesion between you and your loved ones back home, it has to exist. We always never forget home. That is a message to the migrant workers. Now, what can the receiving countries, governments in the receiving countries do? Economic situations like this always arise, but it's an opportunity actually for those that govern out there to continuously reflect on how they can improve on the lives of their citizens by enacting policies that can encourage investment, creating jobs, looking at the educational curricula that they are offering to the populations, and so on and so forth. And also improving and encouraging businesses. I always say this, encouraging businesses through their tax policies. So that is the role of governments, because your citizens can't be at the receiving end for so long. We have to have a gradual shift of the population. Those that are receiving or expecting money from overseas, the numbers need to decrease over time. And you have to put these kind of measures in place to actually look at that. So we've touched on the host country, the migrant worker who is sending money. We've also talked about the receiving governments, and now we want to close with the receiver. About the receiver, I want to first of all say that you shouldn't blame yourselves for being at the receiving end, having to depending on money from overseas in part. It is important to know that while you depend on money from overseas, you need to take certain things into consideration. Number one, it's about acknowledgement. The money that your loved ones send from overseas to you is hard-earned currency. Hard-earned. That is the first thing. And when I talk about hard-earned money, I'm not referring to hard labor that is earned through hard labor. Some of it can be, because people do different jobs. But I'm referring to this concept that some people may think that it is easy out there, and that they make money and that they easily, and so you may not be very diligent when you receive what is being sent to you. So it's good to acknowledge that it's money that has been earned through hard work, and those that send actually make sacrifices to send that money. They know that it is needed. So that acknowledgement is good. The second thing is, I want to call on you out there, especially those that are still very active, the youth, that it is time to rethink some of the ways that we live and do things. It is time to add value to some of the things that you do. Add value to yourselves. And this is a topic I'll develop later on. But what I mean by adding value is when you choose the kind of educational programs that you want to choose going forward, especially those that are doing adult education, or starting from scratch, you need to rethink the kind of programs you're getting in. Skill building programs. So the times have changed. You need to rethink, even if you're going in for general education or for whatever, you need to acquire some skills that are relevant in the communities where you live, so that you can make yourself sustainable, self-sufficient over time, improve living conditions. So the general message here is that we need to rethink and add value to what we do. And this means choosing wisely some of the educational programs that will render us more skilled, give us actionable skills, give you actionable skills to be relevant within your community. Number two is you need to take on some traits that you've shown in the past, because the times have changed. So this is a topic that I'm going to develop further in the long run. In closing, what do we see in terms of remittances in the long run? So the effects of this pandemic are there. They will linger around for a little while, And so that means that it will take some time for those that are sending money to reach the levels for which they used to send money back home. So there are short-term and long-term expectations. In the short term, it's very likely that the outflow of money is still going to be in decline. And remember that even when things are back to normal, these people will have to deal with the financial burdens that have accumulated over time during this period. They will have to service those debts before they can actually reach the levels that they are comfortable to be able to send money. I just thought that I'd talk on this topic on remittances and continue to encourage both those that send money and those that are receiving just to stay alert and remember the times that we live in, but not being discouraged, be empowered, be positive, and strive for a better tomorrow. So I call on you to subscribe to this channel, share the video. We'll be looking forward to some really exciting information. We'll continuously prepare and send to you. So thank you for watching.